Hey everybody, this is Way to Fail, back with more Mothership Jool in Kerbal space program. This is the 7th iteration of it. As you can see, I am transferring over some fuel, some monopropellant, some everything else, just making final preparations, because if you caught it last episode, we actually have the mothership together. We're actually flying to Jool, and right now, today's episode is going to be really about two things. The first is going to be about getting an Aerocapture into Jool, which we'll talk about that process a little bit as I slowly do the transfer here to adjust the weight of my tanks and everything else, because I did use a lot of monopropellant from the middle part of my ship on the little probes here. But yeah, the first part's going to be actually getting an Aerocapture, but since that isn't terribly complicated, well, on paper it isn't terribly complicated, we should be able to get a little bit of Julian exploration in this video as well. But as you can see, Jool is a gas giant for Kerbal Space Program, and in order to get a successful Aerocapture, you really want to get somewhere above 100,000 kilometers and somewhere below 130,000 kilometers. Go too low and you're going to be going into the gas giant and no escape whatsoever. Go too high and you miss it. And there is some pretty dirty math that I didn't do here. This is more just my experience from trial and error, but there are some good charts online in terms of if you're approaching Jool at X speed, how deep should you go into there. And my goal is to get just an elliptical orbit that I can work with, because it's pretty easy to bump yourself out to about 300,000 or so kilometers, which is pretty simple here. But you see, I'm doing very little engine work, and you see this maneuver actually is not taking a lot here. And by the way, the orbit got wonky because I ran into a moon there with the maneuver. No, but see just how little it takes for adjustments and tweaking. We're going to have a lot of this first. To get your apoapsis down is just getting a little bit closer. You can see I'm at 19 or so, and just adjusting these markers a little bit. This ship is a behemoth to kind of go around, but let's just go ahead and skip straight to the, we have a pretty good periaps, and we're just time accelerating our way into the Julian system. There we go. There is Lathe going behind Jool, Val passing in front. Nice little screenshot opportunities. I'm attempting to send science away here. I'm not going to be showing too much of the science scanning here. Just know that science is taking place, and you can actually see my orbiter from my last series as well. Just remember, there's going to be a few things that come up from my last series that come up in this episode as well. So here we go, going a little bit faster in terms of time acceleration, as we are actually about to dive into the Julian atmosphere. And one thing is, where I am taking down the solar panels here, that's interesting to note is just that, you know, trying to control this with RCS is pretty tough, and actually every little bit of RCS movement does adjust my movement, my periaps just a little bit. But there we go. Looks like I have a pretty good dive. But one really underestimated thing, and something that you don't see so much from the 4x acceleration here, is I am frantically trying to do science, trying to get all of my experiments on there, is that, and this is being run at 4x acceleration for a very specific reason, that is that this lagged like hell. Like the burn here, we're going to see that as I dive into the atmosphere in just a little bit. You can see I'm over 200,000 kilometers up and just still in the upper atmosphere. Jool, for being a gas giant, has very interesting atmospheric qualities. We'll get to that in a little bit. As we're approaching periaps here, the fire went super slow here. It actually looks kind of normal on 4x acceleration, but I promise you it's one of the more unimpressive Aerocaptures I've had. But I know a lot of that just has to do with the as here we get the first opening flames here, is just the fact that this is a 700, 800 part ship together here, and my system, while good, apparently is not that good. So we do have some burning, we do have some science going. We will not be dipping into the atmosphere with the main ship any further than this, but you can see if this was on 1x acceleration, you'd see just how wonkily and how slow the altimeter is going down. But because we're going a little bit faster, everything looks like it's going to heave-ho kind of normal here, as the bend of the orbit is officially going the right way here. And we're going to see, once I get into a little bit more of an Aerocapture here in a second, there's the bend, there we go. The trajectory actually turns around, and now we're going relative to Jool. So we have an Aerocapture. The question now is, did I go too deep? As there's my other science missions there. Did I go too deep into the atmosphere? We've passed the periaps. We're actually going back up now. So from the looks of it, I should probably end up somewhere beyond Lathe with my orbit. I'm hoping not to be too far from Tylo or Val, so that way I can go ahead and dump some of my drones just to get that in there. I don't want to have a orbit so elliptical that I have to go to BOP or something. And you can see some stuff up there. That's from some planet mods that are currently installed. Not doing a lot with them yet, but that's maybe something to look at for the future, because now we're focused on Jool. Here we go, going further and further in. There's Tylo, there's Val, Bop, Paul, Lath. The whole system waiting to be explored by these brave Kerbals who have just come into here. As we can see, our orbit is decaying a lot slower now. We're getting out of the atmosphere. And so this is kind of what we're going to be looking at. It looks like I'm a little bit beyond Tylo, which is not bad at all. Not quite what I wanted, but let's go ahead and accelerate out there. Because this orbit is very likely, with the speed Lath goes around Jool, it's very likely going to be hitting Lath at some point. We could actually be having to adjust a few times because Tylo is kind of a gravity magnet. And you can see, because I did not hit Jool straight on like I thought I might have, I'm actually flying above Tylo's orbit right now. So that's going to make for some more course corrections and adjustments. But regardless, just a quick burn after I flip this ship over. Just a quick burn is all it's going to take for me to actually get my periaps up to about 300,000, which I do here. So looking for encounters right now is kind of the name of the game. And that would include looking for Lath, which right now we're not there, but maybe within a few orbits. So we have Lath, we have Tylo, we have Val. Those are kind of our big first three easy targets. They are on a, what is it, 124 resonance? I forget the resonance. I should know. It's the same thing as some of the Galilean moons going around Jool. But I'm sorry, I'm not very good sciencey today, but here we go, just accelerating some orbits. And we're going to see here pretty soon, there's an encounter with Tylo. So congratulations, probe number 1, you have been volunteered to be a member of Tylo. But I want you to look at the probe that's going off for a second, because there is one small portion of this mission that I did not take into account that actually recalls a flub that I had, and you're going to see it right now, a flub that I had in one of my first science missions to the moon and Minmus. And that is the decoupler that I have, the radial decoupler. I should have oriented them the other way so that they actually stayed on the ship. But instead, that decoupler right there is totally obliterating my ship's center of gravity. I cannot burn straight right now. I do not have the proper SAS. For some reason, that decoupler staying on the side there is really just screwing up my ship entirely. So right now, see here, I've had bad burns. That's given me a lot lower fuel here. That could hurt this mission. Now, I wasn't expecting to land on Tylo with this probe, honestly, as we're going to be renaming it a crash test. That's all I was ever expecting with this. I could leave it in orbit, but why? Let's go ahead and just rename it here. But no, what we get instead is mistakes that I've made before that I'm making again. So that's a little bit frustrating. Like I said, for Tylo, it's not a huge deal because while I could have the delta V to possibly slow myself down, I'm not confident here. But for something like Val that has lower gravity, and even for things like Bop or Paul, which require very precise landings, this is a very, very bad design flaw. And I could go into the files and edit the weight of the part and see if that could possibly fix it. But to be honest, at the time of this recording, I didn't really have the know-how to do that. So just kind of live with what you live with. Going to go ahead and adjust my maneuver node. This is for my probe to try and get a close encounter with Tylo, albeit it's a pain in the butt because if I go much beyond 1/3 or 1/4 acceleration, I start to flip out. And we're going to see a little bit more of that later, but let's go ahead and switch back using hotkeys, because that's exciting, to the mothership because they're still close enough. Now, the mothership has the interesting conundrum of, it has a encounter with Tylo, and if I don't do something about it, it's going to be a problem. Now, burning retrograde at the periaps is not the best use of fuel ever, but I do need to adjust my orbit in some way, shape, or form so that my ship's not colliding with Tylo right now. But at least I'm getting a lot of free speed, if that counts. So just trying to get my burn in ahead of time, as all those nuclear engines are just doing their work here. I just really don't want to screw up my orbit very much. So while this is, once again, not the optimal course of action, I've got to do something to avoid Tylo. It has gravity and size very similar to Kerbal. My understanding's correct, and this is going completely off memory. The gravity is slightly less with a very similar sphere of influence. It's just as large as Kerbal, and it has no atmosphere. So just trying to do a burn here, make it a little bit different, trying not to have an encounter at all with Tylo. Although I could probably live with that kind of orbit. It could straighten me out just a little bit, but no need to slingshot myself back into Jool. So using a lot more fuel than I was hoping for, but looks like we're going to be trying to orient ourselves for Vol next. So there's the mothership having to once again dump more fuel, but you know what, at least we're at Jool, nothing else. But here is our Tylo crash test dummy, crash test probe, and there's Tylo in the distance, a body that I've never actually really seen very much. Even in my prior orbiter probes view of the Julian system, it orbits really close to Jool because it's trying to avoid the Lathe orbit, so I never really get that great of a look of Tylo. So there's that. Meanwhile, we have another probe that's kind of on the horizon here, and you can see that there is an actual Lathe encounter as well as we have just some loading and unloading issues, because that's kind of how this mission is going here. Just a quick pop maneuver nobs here, because the first thing I'm going to do is trying to get into orbit around Tylo. You can see I have another probe that's been launched. That probe is going to be going for Val. You can see it has a similar but not entirely the same orbital trajectory as the mothership here. So overall, simultaneous mission's always fun, especially when I'm not using a mod like Alarm Clock. But just trying to get these little things together. Once again, the burn is a pain in the ass. If you see the maneuver ball going around, it's definitely an issue. But I thought about trying to make a purely circular orbit at first, but instead I decided to make it pretty elliptical, because since I'm going to be crashing anyway, I kind of want to have my orbit not use. I'd rather use my fuel for actually decelerating into the planet to try that as much as possible. But at least here we have one probe that is a little bit successful, albeit alone in space. And it's interesting now that I'm sort of oriented to Jool, having a little bit of directional sense issues actually, but we're flying backwards right now. Our flight direction is very, very weird. But once again, this is the real frustration and disappointment of this whole set of missions so far, is that I'm really hoping to probe these moons, and right now I'm not sure if design defects are going to allow me to actually do that. But we are in the Tylo sphere of influence. I can go ahead and do some kind of burn here, at least let myself get a little bit closer and then work on the burn. So here's Tylo. If you want a Kerbin's future with too much rocket fuel going into the atmosphere, boiling off everything, no plant, no vegetation, just asteroid strikes. There's Tylo. What a happy place. There's your little sciencey description, blah, blah, blah. And Tylo, they thought it was a speck of dust because they kept trying to get a perfect picture of Jool and they couldn't. But there is going to be some dark side maneuvering here, and I do not have a mod installed that puts in some ambient light, which is on my to-do list for future series, because having lights is good, but having not everything so dark that my video editing software makes it way too dark is also pretty nice. So close flyby of Tylo here. But I think we're going to be getting a little bit closer. Now there's not too much I can do other than some of the science, just observing the goo, everything else, and sending it off. Because if I'm going to be doing a landing on Tylo, that's going to have to come way later. Originally the goal was to kind of science spam my way out. But if you remember from my first episodes and just my whole science career mode series to now, they changed it and rightfully patched it to where you can't just use one box and science your way to maximum science gain. But at least we have a little bit here. We have a nice view of the galaxy skybox up here. And otherwise, it's just going to be a matter of transmitting data. Now, I do have some solar panels on here, so I do have some ability to do that at least, as there is the science flying away back to Kerbin, because there's no communication mod for this is how you have to talk to other people. I'm not sure if I'm making a lot of sense right now, but yeah. Like I said, it's exciting, as exciting as it is to be around Tylo right now. I'm more just a little bit concerned about the future missions here, because even though I have landing legs on this probe, because it just got picked first, it drew the short straw. It drew the mission where it's definitely going to crash. Maybe one day I can go back to Tylo and recover some parts if any of them survive. But looking at my surface velocity right now, that may not work very well. Meanwhile, my Vol probe. Right now, it's not making an encounter, but eventually over time, if I do this just enough, I should be able to hit some kind of encounter with Vol. Now, I can adjust my maneuver node to really try and change my orbit here just to go around and around until I hit vol. But that doesn't seem like the most efficient use of nodes and everything. But just trying to get a sense of where everything is right now and how long it's going to take me. It's probably going to take a few more orbits before I can even hit it, because look at how far away the markers are from each other where it is. So it's going to take a little bit of time. I already don't have a ton of fuel on this probe, so yeah, that's how it goes. So it'll just be flying, flying, flying off into the distance. So going back, so I'm going to be going back here in just a minute to the Tylo probe. And remember, this is a crash test, and it's not like I have something on there to measure the seismic impact of everything. I'm not sure. I imagine if Tylo's that large and that barren that it doesn't have any kind of metallic core, any kind of magma or anything. It just is like a dead planet. But there's a great view of it as I have my landing legs out. And look at this. I'm getting close to my apoapsis, and I'm still going so fast. I need to be decelerating right now, pretty much, to try and have any hope for survival. But there is no hope for survival, not with this ship. So, like I said, you get to see some sparks fly, some fire burn, some whatever you want to call it. All in the name of, it's not like I'm getting extra science for this or anything. It's just that, you know, sometimes, I mean, let's look at the moon for a minute. We've had some manned missions to the moon, supposedly, but let's say for the sake of argument that there have been manned missions to the moon. Other countries have made it to the moon as well, but I mean, the Indian Space Federation, they crashed something into the moon. It was supposed to be a lander, but it ended up crashing. Like, we discovered on the crashing that there are some water particles that were just picked up and everything right before it hit there. So there's ice on the surface of the moon. Things discovered like that. Just the point is that crashing things into planets, while terribly human or terribly Kerbal, or just something's like we're going to pollute the rest of the atmosphere, can still be very scientifically viable. And that's kind of what we're trying to imitate here. As, all right, you can see rotations are going okay. This is not time accelerated, by the way. And you'll see why this is not time accelerated in just a minute. Although we are going to be doing some game time acceleration, just get a little bit closer. But you can see here I'm going to try and burn my surface. And this makes me really sad here, because as we just go up for the last time, my retrograde burns are starting, just trying to get everything down, down, down. And I can't even keep things straight. But I do want to go for a daytime landing just so that I can see and you all can see what's going on here. And presumably you don't want to land on the dark side just so that the mothership can't communicate with it. But I don't have any mods right now that affect communication one way or another. But still, the hardest part by far of flying this beast of a probe is just keeping it straight right now. But we are going to be landing towards the top of Tylo, right about that crater that you see on the top there. So let's just go ahead and accelerate. Look at my speed go up. And remember, there's no atmosphere to break. And you're going to be seeing very similar speeds to, say, if you're trying to get back to Kerbal or something. But yeah, just final adjustments, and this is already a doomed to fail. I should really be decelerating right now. And look at how much fuel that I have. This is essentially, because this is a crash probe, this is fuel that I could have back on my ship, and I don't. And I really, like I said, if I was going for a landing, I should have been decelerating this whole time and just going in from a, I don't know if you call it a suicide drop from that high up, but at this point I've kind of given up on the anything other than crashing into the planet. So we're going to see just how fast we can go, and I learned really quickly, wow, I underestimated the gravity of Tylo. You can see I'm going between the orbit and the surface speeds here, and let's put it this way, we're fast. We're really fast, and there's nothing that's going to stop us. And because I can't do a straight burn, and I don't think the LV909 is suited for this job the same way that maybe a ion engine would be later on. Or maybe if I install something like Interstellar, there's some more fancy engines that can do it. I know the NASA mod, which was not out yet when I record this video, which tells you a long time how long it's been between recording and cutting the footage, but that's more because of the last episode than this one. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. Right now you can see, I realize we're 100,000 meters to the surface, and I am going stupidly fast. Wow. Okay, yeah. I had heard before that Tylo was the toughest place to land on the Kerbal system, and I just kind of laughed it off as, toughest, but it's not that bad. Yeah, it's totally that bad. No atmosphere. I can't even fly this thing straight. You can see I'm trying to burn as hard as possible, and yeah, I can't even keep myself on the retrograde marker going at full acceleration. So we're going down, down, down at thousands of meters per second here. I'm doing no dent to my deceleration here. I'm just being swallowed whole by the Tylo gravity well. Is this home of the Kraken? It sure feels like it right now. As we see, there's Jool on the horizon. There's Lathe on the horizon, or Vol, probably Lathe. And boom. Hit so hard you went through the planet. Ooh, yeah. Okay. So there you have it. We have successfully poked Tylo, as I do a attempt to autosave just for fun. But yeah, there we go. Absolutely no remains. No part of my ship survived. However, I can still see Lathe just a little bit. But yeah, there is our first crash test, as we have the different stats there, different data. And this is just from when the ship separated off of the mothership here. But you can see massive G's, massive just everything. And overall, really just not very safe, not very good. But there is some big news here. The mothership is about to have an encounter with Lathe after just a few more orbits. Now that means two things. If I don't adjust the orbit of the mothership, I'm going to crash into Lathe, or at least have an orbital swing in such a way that I'll be crashing into Jool. The good news is that my Lathe lander is ready, it's tested, it succeeded in landing on Kerbal and leaving Kerbal, which means that part of the mission should at least be successful. But of course, I thought the probing would be successful as well, and you'd be surprised at what ghosts pop up in the machine as you go on here. So all I'm doing is making a quick turn to detach the lander and send my brave orange-suited Kerbals on their way. As remember, I do not have all of my starting crew anymore, but here we go. There's the big detachment. Jebediah will be the one flying, because who else would you trust in Kerbal Space Program? Seriously, but otherwise, fuel's already been adjusted. It's just time to let go, undock. There we go. The mothership is about to send off more Kerbals to another space system. If there is a successful landing, this will be the furthest I've ever landed away from Kerbal ever in this game. But there we go. Not too much to it. A little bit of exploration of the Julian system so far. And next time we're going to be focusing on this Lathe lander. As you can see it flying off the mothership, still having some probing to do. Vol's a big to do. That probe's already out there. Going to be probing Jool, Bop, and Paul as well. But definitely the keystone, we're pretty sure this is going to work, but I still got to make it work. Part of the mission is just getting that Lathe lander to actually land on Lathe and get some valuable science. I'm hoping for a soil return and all of that, but here's the burn to save the mothership from crashing into Lathe, as that's actually a terribly, kind of a tough orbit to avoid. I'm actually having to fly through the planet and its sphere of influence. But there we go. That's safe, and now we just have the lander here. And unfortunately, due to some recording hiccups, I actually don't have a great picture of my long-form approach to Lathe here. So what we're going to see here is a very time-slowed-down picture in just a second of a preview of next episode, we could call it, as there's the remainder of the mothership going off, and there is the lander approaching Lathe. Plenty of fuel. Its crew of 2, good to go. Its jet engines all intact, parachutes with maximum integrity. I think this is going to be a successful part of the mission, but I still feel the pressure because I've been hit with some surprises so far. But like I said, beautiful views throughout this. I really like the atmosphere mods, and I have updated them since then. But here is our encounter. There is some adjustments to be made. We'll talk about that, but here is the approach for next time. So next time we're going to be sending our 2 bravest Kerbal over to Lathe and Jool. And that's it for now. This is Way to Fail. Hope you like what you saw. We'll fly with the Julian system a little bit more next time. Take care.